The courtroom was silent, heavy, and full of tension. Madison Cole stood alone at the center, facing the people who once called her family. Her in-laws, the Harrington family, sat in the front row with confident smiles. They looked calm, almost proud, like they were watching a show they had already won. They had planned this moment for months. In their eyes, today was the day Madison would be exposed, embarrassed, and completely destroyed in front of everyone. They wanted her reputation to fall apart so badly that even her own husband would turn away from her. The opposing lawyer stood up and began speaking with a sharp, confident voice. He painted Madison as someone fake and selfish. He called her a woman who married for money, someone who never truly cared about the Harrington family. Every word was designed to make her look small, weak, and undeserving. Madison did not speak. She did not react. She just stood there quietly, her face calm and unreadable. People in the room started whispering. Some thought she had already lost. Others felt uncomfortable, but no one stopped the lawyer. Her in-laws exchanged satisfied looks. Her mother-in-law leaned slightly toward her husband, whispering something while smiling. They believed Madison was breaking down inside. They believed she had no answer left. But Madison's silence was not weakness. It was control. She listened carefully to every word, every accusation, every lie being told about her. She did not look at the crowd or the cameras. She focused only on the truth hidden inside the noise. The courtroom did not know it yet, but this was not the moment of Madison's defeat. It was the beginning of something none of them were prepared for. Months earlier, the Harrington family had already made up their minds about Madison. In their eyes, she never truly belonged with Evan Harrington. They saw her as too quiet, too ordinary, and not worthy of their name. What started as small complaints slowly turned into something much colder and more calculated. It began with private conversations at family dinners, where Madison was criticized for the smallest things. The way she spoke, the way she dressed, even the way she stayed silent in arguments. Evan tried to defend her at first, but over time the pressure around him kept growing. His parents never shouted. They didn't need to. Their disappointment was enough. Eventually, the Harringtons decided they wanted her gone. Not just from their home, but from Evan's life completely. They believed a direct confrontation would not be enough, so they chose something stronger, a legal attack that would make Madison look like she was the problem. They contacted Victor Langston, a lawyer known in their circle for being aggressive and unforgiving in court. He didn't ask many questions. He only asked what they wanted. When they told him their goal, he simply nodded. He understood the message clearly: make her look guilty, make her look undeserving, and make her lose everything in public. From that moment, every step was planned. They gathered old arguments, twisted small misunderstandings, and turned private moments into evidence. They rehearsed what they would say in court, making sure their story sounded clean and believable. Even Evan was pulled into it slowly, without fully realizing how deep the plan had become. The real aim was never just a legal win. They wanted Madison emotionally destroyed. They wanted her to feel isolated, blamed, and broken enough to walk away from Evan on her own. In their minds, if she left, the family problem would be solved without them looking like the villains. What they never considered was that Madison was not as unaware as they thought. The day of the hearing arrived, and the Harrington family treated it like a public event rather than a legal case. They had already informed relatives days earlier, making sure the courtroom would not feel empty. People they had not spoken to in years suddenly showed up, sitting in the gallery with curious eyes and quiet excitement. They wanted witnesses. Not for justice, but for impact. In their minds, the more people saw Madison fall, the more real their victory would feel. Every seat filled made them feel stronger, like the outcome had already been decided. Outside the courthouse, a small news crew set up their equipment. Someone from the Harrington side had given them a tip, promising a dramatic case involving betrayal and fraud. The reporters expected tears, shouting, maybe even an arrest. They came prepared for a story that would get attention. Inside, the atmosphere felt different for Madison. She noticed the extra faces, the whispers, the way people looked at her before the hearing even began. It was clear this was not just about law anymore. It had turned into a performance, and she was the center of it. The Harringtons sat together in the front row, dressed neatly, acting composed. But their eyes gave them away. There was excitement behind their calm expressions. They leaned toward each other at times, speaking in low voices, almost smiling as they watched Madison take her place. One of them quietly said she would not recover from this, and the others agreed without hesitation. They truly believed that after today, Madison's life would collapse in front of everyone watching. They imagined Evan finally stepping away, embarrassed and free from what they called a mistake. But what they didn't notice was how Madison remained still. While the room buzzed with anticipation, she was not looking at the crowd or reacting to their stares. She was simply observing everything around her, as if memorizing the stage they had built for their own plan. During all their planning, the Harrington family never thought to look deeper into Madison's real life. They were too focused on their anger and assumptions to question who she had become over the years. To them, she was still the same quiet woman Evan had brought home the first time, soft-spoken, polite, and easy to overlook. They built their case on that image. In their minds, Madison worked a simple office job and lived a simple life. Nothing about her seemed threatening to them. They believed she had no power, no influence, and no real support if things turned against her in court. Because of this belief, they never bothered to check her professional background properly. No one asked where she had studied after college. No one looked into the years she spent away from family gatherings or why she was often busy during important events. They simply assumed she was not important enough for any of that to matter. What they did not know was that Madison had spent years quietly building a different life. While they were busy judging her from a distance, she had been working in a structured legal environment, learning the system step by step. She had stayed away from attention, never mixing her personal life with her professional growth. Her name existed in places they never thought to search. Her work was recorded in files they never opened. She had attended meetings, handled cases, and worked under people who respected her discipline and precision. None of this was visible to the Harrington family because they never looked beyond their own assumptions. Even Evan never fully understood how much she had built on her own. Madison never felt the need to explain it to anyone. She preferred silence over discussion, action over explanation. So while the Harringtons prepared their legal attack with confidence, they were actually stepping into a situation they had no real understanding of. They thought they were confronting someone ordinary, but they had no idea how much they had underestimated her entire existence. Weeks before the trial, Madison submitted a simple request through the court system. There was nothing dramatic about it, no special attention drawn to it. It was just a formal adjustment to how the case would be handled. She asked for a bench trial instead of a jury trial. To most people, it would not have seemed important. But in legal procedure, it changed the entire structure of the case. It meant one person would decide the outcome instead of a group of jurors reacting emotionally to arguments. At the same time, something unexpected happened. The original judge assigned to the case became unavailable due to scheduling conflicts. The court followed standard procedure and reassigned the case to another judge. The transition was done quietly, without announcements or public attention. No one outside the system paid any attention to it. The Harrington family certainly did not. They were too focused on building their case and preparing their arguments. They believed everything was still moving exactly as planned. What they did not realize was how carefully everything was aligning. Madison did not interfere with the process. She did not question the reassignment or try to influence it in any visible way. She simply allowed the system to move naturally. During this time, she remained calm and distant from the growing tension. She did not argue with anyone in her personal life about the case. She did not show concern or fear. Even Evan noticed that she had become unusually quiet, but he assumed it was stress from the lawsuit. Behind that silence, however, there was patience. Madison was not reacting to what was happening around her. She was observing it. Every change, every procedural step, every detail was noted but never interrupted. The courtroom was still days away, but the foundation of everything had already shifted. The people preparing to attack her did not realize that the structure of the trial itself had already moved into a position they did not understand. And Madison still said nothing, choosing to wait until the moment arrived. As the hearing continued, the courtroom felt heavier with every passing minute. Victor Langston pushed forward with his arguments, raising his voice slightly as he tried to control the room. He moved papers quickly, pointing at documents as if each one proved something undeniable. His tone was sharp, almost forceful, designed to pressure Madison into reacting. But Madison did not give him what he wanted. She sat still, hands folded, eyes steady. There was no sign of panic or frustration. No interruption, no attempt to defend herself in the middle of his statements. Her silence became noticeable, almost uncomfortable for those watching closely. Victor noticed it too. He leaned into his next argument even harder, adding more emotion into his words. He tried to frame her as careless, dishonest, and disconnected from the truth. At moments, he even paused briefly, expecting her to respond, to break, to say something that could be used against her. She never did. In the gallery, the Harrington family exchanged small, satisfied looks. They interpreted her calmness as surrender. To them, it looked like Madison had already accepted defeat but was too proud to show it. A faint smirk appeared on her mother-in-law's face as she whispered something to the person beside her. They felt the case was going exactly as planned. But what they didn't understand was what Madison was actually doing in that silence. She was listening differently than everyone else in the room. She was not reacting to the tone or the performance. She was separating facts from emotion, statements from intention, truth from exaggeration. Every sentence Victor spoke was being measured carefully. Every claim was being stored, compared, and tested against what she already knew. She was watching for inconsistencies, for overstatements, for the small gaps that people usually missed when they spoke too confidently. The louder the arguments became, the clearer the patterns were to her. While others saw a woman staying quiet under pressure, Madison was treating the entire exchange like data. And piece by piece, the structure of the opposition's case was becoming visible to her in a way no one else in the courtroom could see. The courtroom doors suddenly opened again, cutting through the tension like a sharp break in sound. Every head turned at once. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, and even Victor Langston paused in the middle of his argument. A court clerk walked in with a firm but controlled expression. He didn't look at the audience or the reporters. He simply moved forward and called for a brief pause in the proceedings. His voice was calm, but it carried authority that made everyone settle back into their seats without question. No one understood what was happening. Madison remained seated, her expression unchanged. She did not turn her head quickly or show surprise. She simply observed the shift in energy, like she was expecting something to change at any moment. Around her, the room slowly lost its rhythm. The Harrington family exchanged confused looks. Their earlier confidence faded slightly as they tried to understand why everything had stopped so suddenly. Her mother-in-law leaned forward, whispering urgently, but no one around her had answers. Victor Langston frowned and lowered his papers. He looked toward the clerk, clearly irritated by the interruption. He had been building momentum in his argument, and the pause broke his flow. He tried to regain control by asking a question, but the clerk did not respond. In the gallery, the invited relatives shifted in their seats. The excitement they had felt earlier began to turn into uncertainty. Even the news crew adjusted their equipment, sensing that something was about to happen, though they did not yet know what. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of attention, but the silence of interruption. Something had entered the space that no one had prepared for. Madison finally shifted slightly in her seat, but only just enough to acknowledge the change. Her eyes moved toward the entrance, steady and focused. She did not look surprised. She looked aware. The entire courtroom waited without knowing why. Every person there could feel it now. This was not a normal pause. Something had shifted in the direction of the case, and whatever was coming next was already inside the room, even if no one could see it yet. Madison stood up slowly as a court officer approached her table. The movement in the room grew quieter, like everyone was holding their breath without realizing it. She did not ask any questions. She simply followed as she was guided forward. Her steps were steady as she moved toward the front of the courtroom. No one spoke. Even Victor Langston lowered his papers completely, watching with a confused expression. The Harrington family leaned forward slightly, trying to understand why she was being taken away from her seat instead of questioned further. A courtroom staff member was already waiting near the bench. In his hands was a dark judicial robe, neatly folded. He held it with both hands and stepped closer to Madison. The gesture was formal, precise, and carried meaning that was not immediately clear to everyone in the room. Madison accepted it without hesitation. She turned slightly and allowed the robe to be placed over her shoulders. The fabric settled into place, and for a moment, the room felt like it shifted in tone. It was not loud or dramatic, but something about the atmosphere changed instantly. Confusion began spreading through the gallery. People looked at each other instead of the front. Whispering started, but it was controlled, uncertain. The earlier confidence that had filled the Harrington family began to fade, replaced by something they could not name. Her mother-in-law suddenly stopped smiling. Her hand tightened around her lawyer's arm as she leaned closer, her eyes fixed on Madison. There was a change in her expression now, something between confusion and concern. She could sense something was wrong, but she could not figure out what it was. Victor Langston finally straightened his posture, watching closely. The case he thought he controlled no longer felt familiar. Madison stood still in the robe, not speaking, not reacting to the growing tension. She simply faced forward as the room continued to shift around her. Every person present now felt it, even if they could not explain it yet. The balance in the courtroom was no longer the same, and everyone could feel it changing in real time. Madison stepped forward and moved into position at the front of the courtroom. The room was already tense, but the moment she turned and faced everyone fully, something about the air felt different. She did not sit where the defendant would sit. She did not stand where a witness would stand. Instead, she took her place behind the elevated bench, the position reserved for the person who controlled the entire room. For a few seconds, no one reacted. It looked almost unreal. People in the gallery stopped moving completely. Even the small sounds of paper shifting and chairs adjusting disappeared. The silence that followed was heavy, like the entire room had been pressed down at once. Victor Langston was still holding his documents when he looked up again. His words stopped halfway through a sentence. His mouth stayed slightly open, but nothing came out. The confidence he carried earlier vanished in an instant, replaced by confusion he could not hide. The Harrington family did not understand what they were seeing at first. Their eyes moved between Madison and the bench repeatedly, as if trying to correct what their mind was telling them. But nothing changed. She was still there, in that position, calm and composed. Her mother-in-law slowly let go of the lawyer's arm. Her face had lost all expression. The earlier satisfaction she had felt was gone, replaced by something she could not process quickly enough. Her father-in-law leaned back slightly in his seat, staring without blinking. Madison did not speak immediately. She adjusted her posture slightly, placing her hands in a calm, controlled position. There was no emotion on her face, only focus. The reality of the situation began to settle in slowly across the room. This was no longer the same case they had entered with confidence. The structure had shifted completely in a way no one had expected. Every person in that courtroom now understood, even without words, that the balance of power had changed completely, and there was no returning to what it had been before. The courtroom reset felt different from anything that had come before. Papers were realigned, voices lowered, and the energy in the room shifted into strict order under Madison's control. The case that had been moving one direction was now being completely restructured in front of everyone. Madison reviewed the file in front of her with steady focus. There was no rush in her movements, no reaction to the tension still hanging in the air. She began by formally acknowledging the restart of proceedings, setting the tone in a calm and controlled voice that filled the room without effort. Every accusation that had been made earlier was now placed back on the table for review. The same statements that once felt sharp and damaging were now being examined with distance and precision. Each argument had to stand on its own, without emotion or performance behind it. Victor Langston tried to adjust, but his confidence was gone. He looked through his notes again and again, as if searching for something that could restore control. Nothing he found helped him regain the position he had earlier. His earlier dominance had collapsed into hesitation. In the gallery, the Harrington family no longer looked composed. Their earlier confidence had disappeared completely. They exchanged anxious looks, realizing that every part of their case was now being viewed through a different lens. The strategy they had built over months was falling apart in real time, piece by piece. The news crew remained focused, camera steady, capturing every reaction without interruption. What they had expected to be a one-sided humiliation had turned into something far more intense. The story unfolding in front of them was no longer about accusation, but reversal. Madison continued without emotion. She did not raise her voice or show satisfaction. She simply followed procedure, guiding the courtroom through each step with complete control. When she delivered the first official ruling on a procedural matter, her tone was neutral, precise, and final. That single decision shifted the direction of the entire case again. What had been designed as a public attack against her no longer held power. Instead, it had turned into a situation where every move made by the Harrington family was now being examined under the authority of the very person they had tried to destroy.